Prince Harry sat alone in his private study, the faint glow of the lamp casting a soft light across the polished oak desk. Outside, rain drizzled against the windows, painting streaks on the glass like tiny rivers. The young prince had always known that being born into the royal family came with challenges, but he never imagined he'd face a betrayal so close to home. A letter lay open before him, its words trembling with venom. "Your time is up, Harry. The stage is mine now." It was signed by Tom Holland, the charming actor who had once been a friend but now stood as his greatest enemy. Harry clenched his jaw. He remembered the day they first met. It had been at a charity gala in London, a night filled with laughter, lights, and empty promises. Tom had seemed so sincere, praising Harry for his service and dedication. But behind that boyish grin lurked a mind sharp enough to slice through any defense. Over time, Tom's influence had grown. His movies, his fans, his smile. People adored him. But Harry had seen the cracks. He'd watched as Tom used his charm to manipulate the press, twisting headlines and stories to make Harry look like the villain in his own kingdom. It all started when Harry tried to support a mental health project close to his heart. Tom had offered to help, but soon the project's name was on every screen, and Tom's face was the one everyone cheered for. Harry's efforts were overshadowed. His good intentions turned into background noise. That's when Harry realized Tom had stolen his story, turning it into his own stage. That was the first trick. But Harry wouldn't let that stand. Tonight, the prince decided, would mark the beginning of his fight back. He stood and walked toward the window, the cold rain reflecting the determination in his eyes. The city lights stretched out below, a battlefield of flickering yellow and white. Somewhere out there, Tom was celebrating another victory, another role, another headline. But Harry wasn't the boy who had once believed every smile. He was a prince, and tonight he would fight for what was right. His phone buzzed. A message popped up from an old friend, an insider from the press. "Tom's planning a new scandal, Harry. He's going to ruin your name tomorrow." Harry's stomach turned, but his resolve hardened. He wouldn't let Tom play his tricks again. He grabbed his coat, the royal crest shining on the shoulder. A deep breath, a final glance in the mirror, and he walked out the door. The night air hit his face like a challenge. Every step felt heavy with history, his family's name, his mother's sacrifice, the weight of the crown. But he carried it all. As he reached his car, he thought about his plan. It wasn't just about stopping Tom. It was about protecting the people who believed in him, the ones who still saw the young prince fighting for the good. The city blurred past as he drove, rain pouring harder now, turning the roads into rivers of silver. Every red light felt like an obstacle, every shadow like a test. But Harry kept his focus. He would not be distracted. He would not be tricked. Tonight, he was more than a prince. He was a warrior, ready to face the actor who thought he could steal his life. And somewhere in the darkness, Tom Holland waited. But tonight, it wouldn't be easy for him. The young prince was coming, and the stage was about to change. The car came to a halt in front of a grand hotel, its glass doors glinting under the streetlights like a gateway to another world. Harry took a moment to steady himself, his heart thudding in his chest. He wasn't just here as a prince tonight. He was here as a man seeking justice. Every doubt that had haunted him, the worries about his family's name, the fear of the press, he pushed them aside. Tonight wasn't about the crown. It was about the truth. Inside the lobby, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. The hotel staff moved like clockwork, their smiles rehearsed, their eyes polite but distant. Harry didn't let them distract him. He walked straight toward the elevator, his steps quick and sure. He could already hear the faint hum of music coming from the ballroom upstairs, a party thrown by Tom to celebrate his latest film, a party Harry hadn't been invited to. Typical Tom. Always the showman, always the center of attention. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Harry stepped inside. As the doors slid shut, he took a deep breath. He could almost hear his mother's voice telling him to stay strong, to trust himself. The memory brought both pain and strength. The lift carried him upward, each passing floor a reminder of how high Tom had climbed, and how far Harry was ready to go to bring him down. When the doors opened, he was greeted by laughter and music. Bright lights spilled from the ballroom, voices blending with the beat of a popular song. People mingled, glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Tom stood at the center of it all, his smile wide, his laughter loud. He was wearing a sharp suit, his hair perfectly styled, surrounded by adoring fans and Hollywood stars. He looked untouchable, but Harry knew better. He moved through the crowd with quiet determination, ignoring the curious stares. A few heads turned as he passed. A prince among commoners, but tonight he didn't care about titles. He only cared about the truth. Tom spotted him from across the room. His smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of surprise and maybe fear. But then it returned, practiced and bright. He lifted his glass and stepped forward. "Harry, what a surprise!" he called, his voice smooth as silk. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight." Harry stopped just a few steps away, his eyes locked on Tom's. "I'm not here for your party, Tom," he said, his voice calm but strong. "I'm here because I know what you've been doing." Tom's smile didn't reach his eyes now. "Doing? What on earth are you talking about, old friend?" He laughed, but it sounded hollow. Harry shook his head, feeling anger boil inside him. "Don't play innocent. I know how you twisted my charity work to make it look like your own, how you spread lies about me to the press, how you've made me the villain in my own story." Gasps spread through the crowd, people turning to watch. Tom's face twitched, his mask slipping for just a moment. Then he leaned closer, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "You think you can beat me, Harry? This world loves me. They worship me. You? You're just a prince in a family of scandals." Harry clenched his fists. The room seemed to fade away. "Not tonight," he said. "Tonight you'll see that the crown is more than just a name. It's a promise, and I won't let you destroy it." Tom's grin faltered, his confidence wavering. The music stopped, and all eyes were on them. Harry stepped closer, his voice low but clear. "You've had your time in the spotlight, Tom, but your tricks end tonight." The room seemed to shrink around them, the crowd of onlookers pressing in like curious shadows. Harry could feel every eye watching him, every camera phone poised to capture the moment. But he didn't care. This wasn't about the press. This was about justice. Tom shifted uneasily, the easy charm fading from his face. He tried to laugh, but the sound came out brittle. "Harry, you're making a mistake," he said, his voice trembling just enough for Harry to catch it. "We're friends. We've always been friends. Don't ruin that." Harry shook his head, his jaw set. "Friends don't betray each other, Tom. Friends don't steal from each other and spread lies. I've spent too long watching you twist the truth to fit your own game. But it stops here." A hush fell over the crowd. Even the music had vanished, leaving only the sound of rain tapping against the ballroom's tall windows. Tom glanced around, his eyes darting to the faces of the Hollywood elite he'd spent years charming. But no one stepped forward to help him. They all seemed frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. Harry took a step closer, his voice steady. "I know everything, Tom. How you used my charity's name to line your pockets, how you turned my words around to make me look weak, how you whispered in the ears of journalists, making sure every headline painted me as the villain. I have the evidence, and tonight the world will see you for what you really are." Tom's face turned pale. For a moment his mask fell away, revealing a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You don't have proof," he spat, his voice cracking. "Nobody will believe you." Harry reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, holding it high for all to see. "I have every email, every message, every twisted lie you told," he said, his voice ringing with the power of the crown behind him. "And tomorrow the papers will print the truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised. Cameras clicked. Tom's hands shook at his sides. "This isn't fair," he said, his voice a trembling whine. "You can't do this to me." Harry's gaze was steady, unblinking. "Fair? Was it fair when you stole my project, when you ruined my reputation for your own gain? Tonight I'm taking back my story. I'm taking back my name." Suddenly Tom lunged forward, his hand reaching for the envelope. "Give me that!" he shouted, his face twisted in desperation. But Harry was ready. He sidestepped smoothly, letting Tom stumble past him and crash into a table, sending glasses shattering to the floor. Gasps and screams rose as the guests backed away. Harry stood tall, holding the envelope close to his chest. He watched as Tom scrambled to his feet, his suit stained with spilled wine, his hair in disarray. The mighty Tom Holland, Hollywood's golden boy, looked like a broken man. Security rushed in, 2 guards grabbing Tom by the arms. He fought, his eyes wild. "You can't do this. I'm Tom Holland. I'm a star," he yelled, but no one moved to help him now. The spell had broken. Harry stepped forward, his voice calm but strong. "This is the end of your game, Tom. I won't let you hurt anyone else the way you tried to hurt me." Tom's eyes met Harry's, a flicker of regret, maybe even shame, flickering in their depths. But then the guards dragged him away, his shouts echoing through the silent ballroom. The guests parted, leaving Harry standing alone in the center of the room, the envelope still in his hand. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking, letting moonlight shine through. Harry lifted his head, feeling the weight of his duty, but also a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he'd done the right thing, like he'd truly honored his family's name. As he walked toward the exit, the crowd watched him with a new respect in their eyes. He was no longer just a prince with a scandal in his past. He was a hero who had faced his enemy and won. The night air hit Harry like a gentle kiss. The rain finally gone, leaving the city washed clean. He stepped out of the hotel and took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill his lungs. The weight that had pressed on his shoulders for months, maybe even years, felt lighter now. The envelope in his hand, full of the evidence he'd gathered, was the key that unlocked his freedom. For too long, he'd let Tom's lies and manipulations shape the way the world saw him. Every time he tried to do something good, Tom was there to twist the story, to make Harry look like the villain. But tonight, that ended. The truth was out, and no matter how powerful Tom thought he couldn't fight the truth. Harry had faced him, and won. A car pulled up at the curb. It was his driver, a man Harry trusted like family. He opened the door, and Harry slid into the back seat. As the car pulled away, Harry looked back at the hotel, the bright lights already fading in the distance. He knew that inside, people were still talking, still whispering about what had happened. Let them talk, he thought. Let them see the real story now. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw dozens of messages from friends, supporters, and even some journalists. The headlines were already changing. Prince Harry exposes Hollywood's dark side. Tom Holland's lies uncovered. For the first time in a long time, Harry smiled. Not the polite, practiced smile he'd learned for cameras, but a real smile that reached his eyes. He leaned back against the seat, letting the city lights blur past. The fight wasn't over, he knew that. Tom's influence ran deep, and there would be people who still believed his lies. But Harry wasn't afraid anymore. He'd found his voice. He'd found his strength. And he knew he could face whatever came next. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Your Highness, where to now?" he asked. Harry considered it for a moment. The palace was waiting, but so was the world. He thought of the people who'd been hurt by Tom's games, the charities that had suffered, the children who'd believed in a lie. "Take me to the press center," he said. "It's time I tell my story." The driver nodded, turning the car toward the bright lights of the city's media hub. Harry felt a sense of purpose settle over him, like a warm blanket. Tonight had been about revenge, yes, but it had also been about justice. It had been about standing up for what was right, no matter how hard or how messy it got. As the car drove on, Harry thought of his mother, of all the lessons she'd tried to teach him about kindness, about truth, about never giving up. He felt her presence now, like a hand on his shoulder, guiding him forward. He wasn't just a prince anymore. He was a man who had fought for his name, for his cause, for his people. The car slowed as it approached the press center. Cameras flashed outside, the crowd waiting for a statement. Harry took a deep breath, ready to face them. He would tell them everything. He would hold his head high. Because tonight, he wasn't the boy the tabloids had torn apart. He was the young prince who had faced the darkness and won. And somewhere in the distance, he knew Tom was watching. Watching and realizing that sometimes even the brightest stars couldn't outshine the strength of a royal heart. Harry stepped out of the car, the cameras capturing his every move. He held the envelope in his hand, the proof of Tom's betrayal. The world was ready to listen, and Harry was ready to speak. Tonight, the prince had his revenge, and tomorrow he would rebuild. The press center buzzed with excitement as Harry stepped inside, his head held high. The cameras were already rolling, their lenses capturing every second of his arrival. Reporters from all over the world had gathered here, their notebooks ready, their microphones aimed. For a moment, the young prince paused and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his family name and all the people who had stood by him. He walked up to the podium, the envelope still in his hand. His heart raced, but he kept his voice steady. "Thank you all for coming," he began. The room went silent, the crowd hanging on his every word. "Tonight, I stand here not just as a prince, but as a man who has been wronged. For too long, I let others speak for me, twist my words, and steal my story. But tonight, I'm taking it back." He held up the envelope. "This contains proof, emails, messages, and recordings that show how Tom Holland used his fame to spread lies about me and steal the work I tried to do for mental health charities. He made me look like the bad guy, and too many people believed him." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But tonight, I'm setting the record straight." The reporters scribbled notes, their cameras clicking. Harry continued, his voice growing stronger. "This isn't just about me. It's about all the people who have ever had their voices stolen. About the charities that lost funding because Tom wanted the spotlight. About the children who believed in him and didn't know the truth. I won't let his lies hurt anyone else." He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of the reporters one by one. "I know that exposing the truth won't erase the pain he caused, but it's a start, and I promise that from this day on, I will fight for honesty, for fairness, and for the people who need my help the most, because that's what my mother taught me, and that's what being royal truly means." A hush fell over the room, the reporters frozen, their pens still. Then, slowly, they began to clap. It started with just a few, then spread like wildfire until the entire press center echoed with applause. Harry felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. This was his moment, his victory. As the cameras flashed and the reporters began to call his name, Harry felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had done what he came to do. Tom's lies were broken, his power stripped away. The truth had won. And Harry knew that even though the fight would continue in the days to come, he had shown the world who he really was. Outside, the dawn was breaking. The city glowed with the first light of morning, the darkness giving way to hope. Harry walked toward the exit, the envelope still in his hand. Reporters rushed to follow him, but he turned and gave them a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for listening." As he stepped into the fresh morning air, he felt a new strength in his heart. He wasn't just a prince anymore. He was a man who had fought for the truth, and won. And somewhere in the distance, he knew Tom Holland was watching and realizing that the young prince he once tried to control had become a hero in his own right. And in that moment, Harry knew he was ready for whatever came next. The car ride home was quiet. Harry leaned his head against the window, watching the city pass by in a blur of lights and shadows. The envelope sat on the seat beside him, no longer heavy, but now a reminder of his victory. He felt a sense of relief, like a burden had been lifted from his heart. For the first time in a long while, he could breathe freely. The palace gates came into view, their iron bars shining in the morning sun. He remembered walking through those gates as a child, chasing after his brother, waving at the guards who always smiled at him. Back then, life had felt simple, safe, but growing up had taught him that even within the palace walls, shadows could creep in, and not everyone with a smile was a friend. The car stopped, and the driver opened the door for him. "Welcome home, Your Highness," he said with a respectful nod. Harry managed a tired smile. "Thank you," he replied, stepping out and feeling the familiar crunch of gravel under his shoes. He paused for a moment, taking in the sight of the palace, its tall windows, its ancient stone walls, its history. It felt different now, like he had earned his place here, like he belonged. Inside, the halls were quiet, the staff busy with their morning tasks. A few heads turned as he passed, their eyes wide with curiosity and maybe a little pride. He nodded at them, feeling a warmth in his chest. These people had always supported him, even when the headlines painted him as the villain. Now, he hoped, they saw him for who he really was, a man who had fought back. He climbed the grand staircase to his study, where the morning light streamed through the tall windows. The desk still held the notes from his charity project, the one Tom had tried to steal. Harry ran his fingers over the papers, remembering all the late nights he had spent planning and hoping. He would make sure the project succeeded. It would be his way of showing the world that no one could take away his purpose. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was his assistant, a kind-faced woman who had always believed in him. "Your Highness," she said, her voice gentle, "the press conference went well. People are already talking. You did the right thing." Harry nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without your help." She smiled, and for a moment, the weight of the world felt lighter. As she left, Harry turned back to the window. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sun shining brightly, a promise of a new day. He thought of Tom, now facing the consequences of his actions. Harry didn't feel hate anymore. He felt something else, maybe forgiveness, or maybe just a deep sense of closure. He would always carry the lessons he had learned. That power could corrupt, that fame could blind, but also that truth would always find a way to shine through the darkness, and that even a prince had the right to fight back. Harry smiled, feeling stronger than he had in years. This was just the beginning. He had his name back, his purpose clear. He would rebuild his charity, his image, and his life. And nothing, not even the bright lights of Hollywood, would ever steal his story again. He turned from the window, ready to face the future, a future he would shape with his own hands, not one written by others. The young prince had found his strength, and this time he wouldn't let go. Days turned into weeks as Harry poured his heart into rebuilding his charity. The scandal with Tom had left scars on the project. Funds had dried up, volunteers had hesitated, and some sponsors had quietly pulled out. But Harry refused to let that stop him. Every morning he rose early, determined to show the world that one man's lies couldn't kill a dream. One bright morning, he stood outside the grand hall where the charity's relaunch event would take place. The sun sparkled on the building's glass entrance, casting a warm glow that made everything feel hopeful. Banners bearing the charity's name fluttered in the breeze, welcoming guests from all over the city. Harry took a deep breath, his heart steady. This was his chance to show everyone that he wouldn't back down. Inside, the room buzzed with excitement. Tables were set with fresh flowers, and the air smelled of coffee and warm pastries. People milled around, talking and laughing. Donors, volunteers, journalists. A sense of community pulsed through the room. Harry moved among them, shaking hands and offering warm smiles. He was no longer just a prince here. He was a leader with a cause. A young woman approached him, her eyes bright with hope. "Your Highness," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "thank you for bringing this project back. My brother struggled with his mental health, and this charity means everything to us." Harry's heart swelled. He took her hand gently and looked into her eyes. "Thank you for trusting me," he said. "We'll make sure no one is left behind this time." Just then, the lights dimmed, and the sound system clicked on. A hush fell over the room as Harry stepped onto the small stage at the front. He glanced at the faces turned toward him, faces filled with curiosity, support, and maybe even a little doubt. He cleared his throat and spoke with the quiet strength he had found in himself. "Tonight," he began, "we stand together to take back what was stolen from us. This charity was built to bring hope to those who need it most, and no lie, no trick can destroy that hope. We've all faced darkness, but together we can bring back the light." Applause spread through the crowd, the sound lifting his spirits. He continued, sharing stories of the people the charity had helped, families finding strength, children finding smiles, lives saved because someone cared. He promised that no matter how many obstacles came their way, they would stand strong. And as he spoke, he saw heads nodding, tears in eyes, hands clapping. It was more than a speech. It was a promise. Afterward, people came up to him one by one, thanking him, sharing their own stories, offering their support. Harry felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. This was what he had always wanted, to make a real difference, not for the headlines, but for the people who needed it most. Outside, the evening air had grown cool, but Harry didn't feel the chill. He looked up at the stars beginning to dot the sky, feeling like each one represented a life he could touch, a heart he could help. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would always be people like Tom, ready to take advantage of trust. But Harry had learned to fight back, and now he had an army of supporters standing with him. He smiled, feeling stronger than ever. Tonight was the start of something new, and he would lead with honesty, with courage, and with the promise that he would never let darkness win again. The night sky stretched endlessly above the palace grounds as Harry walked alone through the gardens. The moon cast a silver glow on the flowers, making them look like tiny stars at his feet. He breathed deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of the past weeks, the fight against Tom's lies, the rebuilding of his charity, all of it had been a test he'd never imagined he'd face. And yet, here he was, stronger than before. He paused near the fountain, the water sparkling under the moonlight. He could still hear the applause from the event echoing in his mind, the voices of the people who had come to stand by his side. Every smile, every thank you had reminded him that he wasn't alone anymore. For so long, he'd carried the burden of his family's name, the expectations, the whispers. But tonight, he had proved to himself that he could be more than a prince. He could be a man who made a difference. In the distance, he heard footsteps. He turned to see his assistant, her face kind but serious. "Your Highness," she said softly, "Tom Holland has released a statement. He's apologizing. He says he regrets his actions." Harry's heart tightened for a moment. He thought of Tom, the bright-eyed actor who had once been his friend, the man who had let ambition cloud his heart. He sighed, looking down at the water. "He made his choices," Harry said quietly, "and now he has to live with them." He felt a hint of sadness, but it was mixed with relief. Maybe Tom had finally seen the cost of his lies. Maybe he would change. Harry hoped so, but he knew he couldn't carry that weight anymore. He had his own path to walk. His assistant nodded and stepped back, leaving him alone again. Harry turned back to the fountain, the water rippling gently. He thought of his mother, her laughter, her kindness, her courage. She had taught him to stand up for what was right, even when the world was against him. Tonight, he had done just that. He had faced his enemy, exposed the lies, and rebuilt what had been torn down. He smiled faintly, feeling her presence in the cool night air. "I hope I made you proud," he whispered. The wind rustled the leaves, carrying his words into the darkness. He felt a sense of calm, a sense of purpose. He knew challenges would come again, new scandals, new enemies. But he also knew he had the strength to face them. He had learned to trust himself, to believe in the truth, and to never let anyone steal his voice again. As he turned and walked back toward the palace, he felt the future waiting for him, like a sunrise. He would keep fighting for what mattered, his family, his people, and the causes he believed in. He would never let the darkness win. And somewhere in the world, Tom would watch. He might find redemption, or he might fade into the shadows. But Harry's story was his own now, written by his own hand, shaped by his own choices. He was no longer just the young prince. He was a man who had faced the storm and found his strength. And with that, the young prince walked on, ready for whatever came next, his heart strong, his spirit unbreakable, and his future shining like the stars above.